So what we'll do today, we'll do a quick process mining 101 refresher. Then we'll run through the building blocks of process mining. Things like what's an activity, what's a breakdown, what is a configuration record, etc. Then we'll jump into an instance and build two different projects. One that looks at how tickets are moving through different states, and another that looks at how tickets are moving through different assignment groups. These are the most common starting points from an analysis perspective for our customers. We'll get your questions answered and look at some additional resources for you to use after today's session. Then we'll wrap up and call it a day. Now, I always like to start these sessions with this quote: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Why I like this quote is it usually aligns to the reason that we've all gathered, right? To learn a little bit more about the ServiceNow platform, then go take that knowledge, bring it back to our organizations, apply it, and help us get more value out of our investment with ServiceNow. It also aligns to the solution that we'll be talking about here today, process mining, which is designed to help automate the process of X-raying the workflows you have running on the ServiceNow platform and showing you where and how you can be doing better for anyone and everyone involved. So we'll just start with a quick process mining 101 for our newcomers. So with everything we do, there is designed and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should play out. Whether it be planning a session like this or a workflow or business process. And when you design things, you design for both completeness and efficiency to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. Now, unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality. The reality is that not all work is going to be flowing through the optimal path, and that's going to have a negative impact on both the experience people requesting a service are having, as well as the people that are trying to deliver that service. Unfortunately, identifying what is actually happening within our processes and then improving them isn't always that easy. What process mining allows us to do is use audit log data that is generated as records move through a given process on the ServiceNow platform, and allows us to generate a representation of what's actually happening within a given process, shows us our reality. And with this new level of visibility, it's going to help us accelerate our ability to identify process inefficiencies, non-conformant process activities, and ultimately improvement opportunities. Process mining gives us the ability to answer process questions that have historically been very challenging to answer. So where traditional analytics will help us answer a lot of the what questions about our processes, process mining helps us answer a lot of the whys. So things like, where is our process getting stuck? Where is there any sort of unnecessary rework happening? Where are tickets ping-ponging or bouncing between groups or teams? Where aren't we conforming to the process that we've designed? These are all things that have historically been difficult to answer and act upon. And now we're just a couple of clicks away with them with process mining, and you're going to learn those clicks today. So we like to say that process mining is going to get you to the why behind all of your KPIs. And in doing so, empower everyone involved in the process to make data-driven decisions about which improvements to make. Let's get to those building blocks. So today we're going to cover all the foundational concepts you need to create a process mining project and visualize your processes. In the next session, we'll cover all the different ways to work with that visualized process map to identify inefficiencies and improvement opportunities. Now, if you can't wait for that next session, there's a bunch of what we call Process Mining Academy sessions that are already recorded and out there on the community for you to help you dig into these different aspects that we're not covering today. What makes process mining possible is in the industry called event data. And when we say event data on the ServiceNow platform, we're really talking about audit log data, not like, let's say, ITOM events. And audit data exists for each individual piece of work or record. So for an example, an incident, a case, a request of some sort. As a piece of work moves through a given process, it creates audit data with each step that it takes. And this audit data, at a minimum, has three values. Record ID, like which piece of work it is, or is it? An activity, what's changed on the record itself, and a timestamp. When did that change? This audit data is what is used to visualize what is actually happening within a given process. And when it comes to ServiceNow, that what the industry calls event data, we store it in the audit log table, right? turning on audit data collection is a configurable option for every table on the ServiceNow platform. In fact, it's turned on by default for something like 140 plus different tables. So more often than not, customers usually have the data they need to do process mining right away. And if you have the rights to do so, you can go to any record and view the history to view its audit log. So if you look at the slide here, we've kind of used that left-hand navigation in the upper left-hand hamburger on the upper left of an incident record. We've went down to the history and the list view, and that's going to show us all the changes that have taken place to this record. And this is the data that we use to visualize the process. Right, it's that audit data, as I was just mentioning, that we use to create the visualized process maps to show you the reality of what is happening within a process, where the bottlenecks are, where the rework is occurring, what's speeding you up and what's slowing you down. Okay, so that's the data piece. Now, what data we mine is all configured inside of a project. Projects are where we configure what data we want to analyze. So besides configuring the data, we also configure a few other important pieces inside of the project, like activities, breakdowns, any child or related tables that we want to link together, and finding definitions, which you'll learn more about here today. Just so you know, there are roles associated to process mining that allow you to create, edit, and share projects. Just keep in mind that process mining is a percentage spend-based entitlement, which means you can give these roles to as many people as you want, and you don't really need to worry about counting heads. These roles really just help you govern who can do what within process mining. It's not something that has an entitlement cost associated with it. Besides the source table, an activity is the most important part of your project. These are the different types of steps that can occur as part of your process. Think state or assignment group changes, which are the most common examples of activities we see within projects our customers create. But they can also be things like, you can have an activity like knowledge article being attached or a subtask being created. You're required to have at least one activity configured for each project, and you can have up to 10. Now, I say you can have up to 10, but readability of the map is certainly something that you're going to want to consider when you're adding activities to a project. Best practice is to have a specific goal or question you're trying to answer within your analysis, and this is going to help us define what activities you should be adding. For example, perhaps you want to do some on-hold reason analysis. In that situation, you might add state and on-hold reason as your activities. Or maybe you want to look at which teams are putting tickets into the on-hold state most often. For this, you may have an activity of assignment group and on-hold reason. Maybe you're interested in analyzing how frequently the risk value of a change is changing. There you may just use the risk value as an activity on a project that's using the change table as its source. There's just so many options available to you, but knowing what you're trying to analyze and what questions you're trying to ask and answer is very helpful when you start to configure which activities you want to add to a project. Now, breakdowns are the next most important thing for you to know about. They act as filters while you're analyzing the map, but they also give you statistical insights into the data, and you can configure up to 10 breakdowns per project. These are typically choice or reference fields. So if you're not familiar with the concept of choice or reference fields, think about a drop-down list or a field with a magnifying glass on a form that you're using. One important note about breakdowns, you have the ability to filter breakdown values when you configure them. So try to use breakdowns that have a reasonable number of values, like in the tens or hundreds, not in the thousands or millions. The only reason I bring this up is because I've seen customers try to use configuration item or CI as a breakdown without filtering it, and they wind up waiting a long time for their process maps to paint on the screen. And if you think about it, of course, it's going to take a while if you're querying a table with millions of values in it and then trying to paint those millions of values on a screen. So just be very conscious when you choose your breakdowns and know that you can apply filtering if you're trying to bring in a breakdown that's got lots of elements. One thing to be aware of is that you have the ability to configure multiple tables in a single map if there's a parent-child or reference relationship between the tables. And this allows you to get end-to-end visibility into a process. So for example, think of a requested item and its associated tasks, or an HR onboarding lifecycle event and all the sub-requests and tasks that could be linked to it. This is definitely a bit more of an advanced topic that we're not going to dive into today. but I wanted to make sure that you knew it can be done. And there's a whole Process Mining Academy session dedicated to this topic. And again, that session is available on the community site. The recording of that session is available on the community site for you if you wanted to dive deeper into multi-dimensional process maps. Finding definitions allow us to set up specific criteria that we want to look for in the data that we're mining to identify inefficiencies, those non-conformant activities, and improvement opportunities. And there's two flavors of finding definitions, rule-based and automated. The rule-based are just what they sound like. You configure specific scenarios. So for example, we might want to configure a finding definition to look for incidents that go directly to a resolved and closed state, and they never move into an open or in progress state. These are the feeding ground for potential self-service opportunities. Or maybe we want to configure a finding definition to look at for cases that take longer than 2 days to route, like move into an assigned or work in progress state, and then less than 2 hours to resolve once they've been assigned. Again, those are both scenarios that are great starting points for looking for automation opportunities and time savings in the organization. Maybe we want to configure a finding definition to look for work that touches Group A, then goes to Group B, and then for some reason comes back to Group A in less than 24 hours. Like, does it really need to go to Group B at all in that scenario? The idea is that you can use these finding definitions to test hypotheses and gather important data about the impact of certain scenarios. And this data is going to help you prioritize where you can act, right? There's going to be no shortage of opportunities to improve. Having the data you need to choose which ones to act on first and prioritize is super important. Then the other flavor of finding definition is something we call an automated finding, where we're looking for specific patterns, process patterns like rework or tickets that are bouncing between the same teams. We also provide both these automated and rule-based ones in a pre-configured fashion as part of workflow-specific content packs we offer via the store to help you get started. So that really important piece, like we'll talk about this, but make sure that you have the content pack for the given workflow that you're trying to mine installed. It's just going to give you a nice jump start to your process mining journey. Now, to adjust or configure these, you're going to find them in what we call process configuration records for each table. And once you import them, then once you have them in that process configuration record, we allow you to import these finding definitions to individual projects. There are, of course, other options to configure, but those are the primary ones that you'll need to know to get started. And we'll look at these live in a demonstration in just a couple minutes. Now, when we talk through it in slides, it just seems like a lot. But when we get into the instance, it's going to be minutes. Like, we're going to be amazed at how quickly we can get this up and running. And once we configure and mine, you're going to be brought to the process mining workspace to review and dig into the results. There'll be 2 or 3 tabs in the workspace for each project, depending on how we configure things. The first is going to be a summary and insights page, which is going to give us high-level information about the data we mined, volume of records, velocity it took for those records to get through the process, and the number of different routes that the work took to get to closure. It's also going to surface all of those improvement opportunities that are based on the finding definitions that we've configured for that table and that project. The findings are going to be grouped and categorized to help you organize your thoughts and kind of choose which ones to dig into first. And you're going to be able to use those as a starting point for any sort of analysis you want to do. The other thing to be aware of is that the Summary and Insights page has a pre-configured dashboard that comes with the content pack for that process or that table. And it contains some out-of-the-box performance analytics KPIs and a little performance analytics dashboard. Now, if you aren't using performance analytics or you're using your own KPIs, the dashboard is going to come up and tell you that, like, hey, I don't have any data for this. So it's going to look like it's broken, but it's really not. You just haven't collected data in your environment for the KPIs that we chose to surface out of the box. So it's all configurable. You can adjust, you can add your own dashboards, you can adjust the KPIs on the screen. I just wanted to call that out because I've had a few customer conversations where they say, hey, it looks like it's broken. Not broken. We're just looking at something that you're potentially not using out of the box. And in Washington, what we've added is an auto-generated dashboard based on specifically on the data that you've mined. So you don't get that screen where it doesn't look like there's any data that's been in the powering the KPIs for you. The second tab is the Visualize Process Map. And this is where you'll spend most of your time using the breakdowns and other capabilities like bottleneck, root cause, and variation analysis to have a conversation with your process data, right? Ask a question of it, get an answer, follow up with another question based on what the data is telling you. Digging into the different capabilities on the workbench, that's where we're going to be spending the bulk of the entire next session in this series, this Jumpstart series. Like I said earlier, if you can't wait, there are a number of different Process Mining Academy sessions out there on the community that cover these different topics, like the histogram and how to use the histogram, or how to filter the map using breakdowns or the variation analysis. The third tab that you'll see in the Process Mining workspace after you mine a project is an optional one. It's something called Automation Discovery. And this is a solution that uses a library of 180 common IT issues and automation opportunities. And what we do is we map those records that we're mining as part of a project via machine learning techniques to that taxonomy of IT issues and automation opportunities. And then the dashboard is going to show you where your biggest potential impact based on acting on the recommended automation opportunities is. We provide a taxonomy for those IT issues. And then there's also a taxonomy for HR cases as well. So depending on which type of data you're going after, whether it be IT or HR, you would apply a different taxonomy. And again, that's set up in that configuration record we'll look at in a second. If there isn't a pre-built taxonomy for the table that you're mining and you choose to add automation discovery to your project, we're simply going to use the platform's machine learning clustering techniques underneath the covers to group the records that you're mining. And you'll have like I said, you'll have the option to turn this on and off per table or per project. Now, the option to turn automation discovery on and off or configure what fields are used for things like root cause analysis and clustering, as well as those process level finding definitions for each table, they live in something called a process configuration record. As I've mentioned a few times already, this process configuration record comes as part of the content pack for each workflow. This is really the only other record you need to know about beyond your project that you're configuring. So before you start any process mining journey or project configuration, you should just validate that the process configuration record exists for the table that you're mining. And we'll go look at that as soon as we get into the instance here. All right, well, let's jump into the instance and take a look at that process configuration record and where it lives, and then we'll create a couple of projects. So I'm going to come over here to my instance. And what I'm going to do now is, you'll notice we're on the Process Mining workspace. How you get here is you go up to Workspaces, say Process Mining Workspace, and there you go. But you'll also have access to Process Mining in your left-hand navigation here. And one of the modules underneath Process Mining is something called a Process Configurations. And if I click on this, this is going to get me to my list of process configuration records for the individual tables that I've chosen to mine so far on this instance. And like I said, we give you these as part of, or base ones as part of the content packs available on the ServiceNow store. So there's a process mining for ITSM content pack, process mining for CSM content pack. You need to just apply or install the appropriate one for your entitlement. I'm just going to open up this incident one here and walk you through it real quick. So inside of this process configuration record, you'll notice that I've got a dashboard aligned to this. That's that out-of-the-box dashboard that we're going to include in any project that is run against or configured against the incident table. You have the ability to override this at the project level, which we'll do in a second. You've got a configuration for automated root cause analysis. This is one of the analytic techniques that's built into the workbench itself. And what you do here is you choose the fields you want to include in that root cause analysis for the incident table again. Here is where you would enable automation discovery if you want to include that as part of analysis against the incident table. And here's where you would choose the associated taxonomy and field that you would use within the machine learning models. And then you've got your linkage to the cluster analysis solution definition that you want to apply when people run clustering from within an incident-based project. So just some initial configurations that you can set up. And then you also have your library of finding definitions, right? So things like, hey, go find me multi-hop issues, incidents that are going through 2 or more reassignments. Go call out all the tickets that are going into the on-hold state more than 2 times within their life cycle. So these are some of the rule-based ones that we provide. Of course, you can configure these and create your own. That's why you see this new button here. And then we've got some automated findings. So things like rework, ping-pong, extra step detection, those are available here. So this one record, the process configuration record, is something that you're going to want to have for every table that you're going to mine. As I mentioned, probably 7 times already, we give you some of these configurations out of the box in those content packs. And then if you happen to be mining a table that's, for a custom application that you've built, you're going to want to come in here and add a configuration record for that table as well. Perfect. All right, that's the configuration record. Let's go back over to that process mining workspace and we'll create our first project. We're going to create 2 projects today. One that does some state-based analysis and another that's going to do some analysis of how work is moving through different teams. So we'll hit create new project. We're going to give this project a name. We'll call it jumpstart state analysis. And what we'll do here is we're going to add one of those dashboards. Any platform analytics dashboard that you've created and has been made available to the process mining workspace, to the process mining workspace is going to be available in this list. We'll just let my list paint here for a second. It usually takes a couple of seconds. I've got a lot of dashboards on this instance. Come on, dashboard list. Maybe I'll click it again. There we go. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find my incident process mining dashboard, add that to the project, and we'll hit save. The first step here is we need to choose the table that we want to mine. You'll notice that this is a related list because we can have those multi-dimensional maps in which we're including multiple tables and using the parent-child relationships to visualize them together on the same map. In this example here, since it's our first time, we're just going to add a single table. We're going to go out and look for our incident table. Any table that has auditing turned on is going to be available to you in this list. So if you're looking for a table, you don't see it in this list, it's likely that auditing is not turned on for that table. You need to go turn that on. And then what you start to do is you start to scope the data for your analysis. And this is just like building a report, right? So typically what we advise customers to do is to mine only closed work. And the best way to get to closed work is set the active flag to false. Could you mine open work or work that's still in flight? Of course you could, but that's going to mess with all your duration values and you're going to be comparing apples to oranges. What we're trying to do is find process improvement opportunities. It's best to find those, analyzing work that has completed the process. And then from here, you can start doing additional things. You can say, hey, I only want to look at work that is closed or has been closed, let's say on the last quarter. And maybe I only care about work that has come in via a certain channel or a certain category or whatever it may be. Maybe I only care about work that's coming in via the virtual agent. I want to do that type of analysis, right? So the idea here is that you can start scoping the work you want to mine or the records you want to mine just based on the questions that you're trying to ask and answer. Now, people often ask, well, Dan, how much data should I mine? Really, you can mine as much data as you want, but the reality is, you could mine 7 years of data if you wanted, but you would hope that your process has changed in the last 7 years. And we're trying to improve things as they're working today. So usually a month or a quarter's worth of data is a good set of data to give you a relative sense of what's going on and where the opportunities might be. You can and there's no floor either. So you can mine just one record, right? I often recommend to customers like, hey, if you're rolling out a new process, you might want to apply process mining to it in the first week or two to start seeing where things are going off the rails early on. So you can make those adjustments early in the cycle. For my demo instance here, I don't have a ton of data, so I'm just going to use the active as false flag, and we've got our 40,000. The next piece here that we're going to do is we're going to add our activity definition, right? Remember, this is the thing on the record that's changing over time that we want to start looking for bottlenecks and inefficient transitions in the process. So what we can do here is I'm going to go choose my state field as my first example. So we'll be looking at how work is moving through the different states of a process. There's a number of different options on this screen for you to choose from based on your use case. For example, this option here allows me to choose specific activity values. So maybe there's I only care about looking at the new, on hold, and resolved state of the process. I can choose those specific state values and only include those in the map. Maybe there's situations where you want to see if something's changing, but you don't need the detailed values. So for example, maybe you want to see when a change was attached to an incident or they were linked together. But you don't need to see the individual change records themselves, each individual one. You just need to know when a change was potentially attached. You would use this group activities options to just put one single node on the map to represent all the different changes and when they were attached to an incident. Activity of interest allows us to use values inside of finding definitions or those rule-based findings, but not necessarily place that information on the map or the activity on the map. And then this include empty start node. This is good for situations in which you're trying to analyze work in which a piece of data or value is not on the record to begin with. For example, I just had a customer a couple of weeks ago where we identified a whole bunch of work that was coming in via an integration in which the new state wasn't being set automatically. And they were losing a ton of time because their dashboards were only showing them work that needed to be picked up if it was in the new state. So we identified about 400 tickets in which that was happening. They were losing about 3 years worth of time just waiting for that state to be set. And these are pretty important pieces of work that needed to get done. All right, so we've configured our activity of state and we're going to hit submit here. The next thing that we need to do is add our breakdowns. So we'll just come over here to our breakdowns. And remember, you can have up to 10 of these, and these are things that are going to allow us to slice and dice the map. So we can add a breakdown of, let's say, category. And then maybe we'll come in here and we'll add a breakdown of assignment group. And now you'll notice that assignment group is going to be a reference field. You'll also notice that I'm getting this tree-based view here. You can dot walk up to 3 levels from a breakdown perspective if you want to get to a different value. You also, if you have some custom fields, they're just automatically going to show up in this list. So we'll add assignment group. You'll notice when I add assignment group, I get this add filter condition because there's a reference field. And this is where I was mentioning you can start filtering and focusing the values that you want to include for larger things like CI potentially. And we'll hit submit. Now that we've got our activities and breakdown set up, we can click this related link to go to project definition. And then the last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to import process finding templates. So if we click that import button, what you're going to see is it's going to go pull from that process configuration record for the incident table all of these different rule-based finding definitions as well as the automated ones that we're seeing here. And you'll notice I also have this ability to add new ones or adjust these right within the project itself to override what I imported if you wanted to do that. So that's how you get those finding definitions in. And now we're ready to mine our data. So we'll click on Generate Model Sample. It's always good to start with the sample mine to make sure that you've got things configured right. What this allows you to do is mine up to 3,600, not 1,000 records based on the criteria that you've put in. So in our case, we just put in active as false. What happens here? Goes out, uses that criteria to harvest the relevant data from the audit logs, then takes that data, passes it off to the machine learning infrastructure inside of your data center to do all of the heavy-duty number crunching. This is done to minimize any sort of performance impact on your core instance. Once that heavy-duty number crunching is done, it's going to spit the finished model back into your instance, clean up everything on that machine learning side, and then we'll be able to start analyzing our data. This usually takes anywhere from a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on the size of the data that you're trying to mine and your place in line with the machine learning infrastructure. But that's it. Like what we just did there, that's the core that you need to know to get started and start visualizing your processes. I mean, that's the power, right? The speed in which we do this. What you saw us just do here would take a traditional process mining tool weeks to get to this place. Just because of the need to connect to the external data sources, figure out what data to pull, format that data, and feed it into the solution. It's about 80% of a typical process mining project. And now that we've done this, we can open the analyst workbench. And you'll see our first summary and insights page here. We'll have our dashboard based on the one that we selected. we'll have our improvement opportunities and the categorization of these based on some of the stuff that we configured in the finding definition itself. And then we've got our improvement opportunities. So for example, of those 3,600 records, you know what, 51% of them were opened and resolved by the same person. That doesn't seem like something that should be happening. And right from here, we could view just those 1,800 in the visualized process map or the workbench. Or maybe let's look at this rework example where 113 of these 3,600, they went into the state of awaiting caller info at some point, and then it came back to the state of awaiting caller info. So we've got those, and then I can jump over to my workbench, and we've got our visualized process map. What you'll see on the map itself, these states, the new, the assigned, the in progress, that's the activity that we configured, and what you're looking at is the volume and the velocity of the work moving between those two states, or those states on the map. And we can start digging into these things like that cluster analysis and the root cause that you saw in the configuration record. This is where those settings would apply. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got your breakdowns. For this project, we just did category and assignment group. And what that's going to show you is both the volume and the velocity of the work that's aligned to those specific breakdowns. And of course, from here, you can start sorting this by the most records, the longest duration. You can start filtering these if you want to filter these breakdowns. And we'll do that in the next example in a second. So that's it. We created our first project. And state is usually the one that we start with in most situations. But now let's create one more. The next most common example that people do is they create projects to look at how things are moving between assignment groups, looking for ping-pong situations, bottlenecks. Can we get things to the right group the first time and save some time from an organizational perspective? So we'll call this one jumpstart assignment group. And we'll add our dashboard again. And we'll hit save. And the configuration is going to be largely the same. So I'm going to move a little quicker this time. We're going to choose our table, which will be our incident table again. Now there's a little bit of uniqueness here when we start configuring the activities that I want you to see. So we'll say incident. We'll go get our incident table. We'll set our conditions of active as false. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't need to do much more because of the data I have in this instance. And now we're going to set up our activity definition. So this time, the primary activity definition is going to be our assignment group because we want to look at how tickets are moving from group to group. So we'll come here and we'll choose assignment group and we'll hit submit. The next thing that we need to do, and this is unique to projects in which we're not using state. The way that the duration values get calculated for the workbench and for the finding definitions is it's using the timestamps based on the activities that we're pulling from the audit log. And if you think about the state activity, if we're using state, we're going to have a state more often than not set on creation of a ticket. So we'll have a timestamp of the very beginning of a ticket's life cycle. And we're going to have a state change to closed at the very end of that life cycle. So we'll have a timestamp at the very end. So we can use, with state, we have very good timestamps, start and end, that we can use for our duration calculations. But if you think about this situation of assignment group, if we're using assignment group as our breakdown, our activity, assignment group could get set at the very beginning of the ticket and then never change. So we don't have that associated timestamp to represent the very end of a ticket's life cycle to help us calculate the duration. One way to enforce and make sure that we have a timestamp at the very beginning and very end is to use the active state, the active field, as an activity. This ensures that it's going to move to true when a ticket gets created, and then it's going to move to false when a ticket goes to end, gets to the very end. So we can add that. It's very clean. It's good to add that for projects in which you're using assignment group as your activity and not using state or don't have state included. It's also good if you're building a project to look at how priorities are changing or things are getting recategorized. Again, active is a good activity definition to add just to ensure you're getting proper duration values. And then we can add some breakdowns here. So we'll just add a couple. We'll add one of category. And then I always like to add for an assignment group project, I think it's helpful to have a reassignment count. breakdown. So you can start filtering and looking at the things that are going through multiple teams or being reassigned multiple times. So let's come in here, we'll add reassignment count, hit submit. Same as before, we'll go to our project definition. We'll import our process finding templates. And then we'll hit our generate model sample again. This will do exactly what it did the last time. It's going to go out. It's going to harvest the relevant audit log data, pass it off to the machine learning infrastructure, do all the work it needs to do there, spit the finished model back into the instance, and then we'll have our new project. As this goes, one of the things that I want to call out, because this was something that took me a little while to grasp, is when you start creating your finding definitions, those rule-based and automated findings, those are only going to apply to a project if you include the relevant activities for those finding definitions in the project. So if you have a finding definition that requires a state value, like, hey, I'm looking for tickets that are taking longer than 12 hours to move from work in progress to a resolved, well, that's only going to trigger and fire in a project that includes state as an activity. If you have a project that has assignment group and no state as an activity, that finding definition is never going to trigger. Same is true if you have some finding definitions for assignment group. If you don't have assignment group as an activity in the project, it's not going to trigger or show up. So just be mindful that if you're not seeing a finding definition, that you may not have included the necessary activities for the rules that you've configured there. All right. This one's finished. We'll open it up and you'll notice that it's going to look a little bit different. And what I'll call out here is if we scroll down and we start to look at our finding definitions for this one, you'll notice that there's significantly less, right? I only have one in this case, a multi-hop issue, because this one is the only one that triggered because it's using an assignment group that's here. Then if I go over to the analyst workbench, you'll notice the map's going to look a little bit different. I'm going to have my different assignment groups instead of state. So now I'm looking at how the volume and the velocity of work is moving from group to group inside of this. I've got my two breakdowns that we added of category and then reassignment count. As I mentioned, reassignment count is an interesting one because I can start filtering on these and saying, show me only the tickets that touched more than 3 teams inside of here, or certain reassigned more than 3 times. Or I can also start using my variation analysis to start looking at the different routes that things are taking. And I can start looking for those multi-hop scenarios and focusing in on just those by clicking on this and hitting apply. How to do the analysis, how to start digging in and using all these different features like breakdowns, variation analysis, bottleneck analysis, and the compare feature or transition filters. I'm going to cover this in the next jumpstart session. Also, as I mentioned more than once here today, these are available already. There's recorded sessions for these topics available as part of the Process Mining Academy that's out there. So we did it. Congratulations. You've now witnessed and learned how to create your first 2 projects from a process mining perspective. And we did all of that in less than 40 minutes. And a lot of that was me just walking through some slides. So before we get to the questions, I just want to cover a couple of other things. Usually we get asked, hey, which workflows can we apply this awesome process mining capability to? Well, just know that it's available for ITSM related workflows, customer service or industry-related workflows, HR case and lifecycle events, field service management, strategic portfolio management, or ITBM for our old schoolers. If you've built custom applications with Creator Workflow or App Engine, you can apply process mining to those. And then as of our Vancouver release, we've opened process mining up so you can import external process data and apply process mining to that as well. So lots of different options out there for you. If you're interested in a deeper dive in any one of these areas, I've mentioned the community site a number of times. There's tons of resources out there. One of them is an article that kind of just brings together all the recordings we have that do overviews for each of those individual areas. So if you search up on the community, what workflows is ServiceNow Process Mining available for, you'll find this article, and that will give you a link to each of the recorded sessions for things like how to do it for external data, how to do process mining for Creator Workflows. So what do you do next? Well, if you haven't already, you're going to go out or have somebody in your organization go out and activate the core process mining plugin from the store. So that's the core plugin. just so you know, in order to install this, you should be on a pro level or above SKU, which you should be able to do. Most of you that are on this call already are there. Then in addition to that, we've talked many times here today already about those content packs. You want to make sure that you install the relevant content pack for the workflows that you're entitled to and trying to mine. And that's going to get you that very important configuration record to jumpstart you on your journey with process mining. Now, in addition to everything that we just covered here today, know that there is no shortage of opportunity to learn more on your own. There is a Now Learning course called Process Mining Essentials out there. A little bit dated at this point. We're in the process of updating that to the most current release, but still good information. A lot of it is similar to what you see me cover here today. There's a great Now on Now white paper out there on the community site that walks through our ServiceNow process mining journey, kind of how we stood up our process mining program here at ServiceNow and some of our initial findings and use cases. There is a very specific community forum for process mining. I check it every single morning to see if there's any questions from customers, and that's where we share a ton of enablement content out there. So it's called a product hub, I think, in the community world these days, but there is a product hub specifically for process mining. I've spoken many times about the Process Mining Academy. This is a monthly webinar that we host where we dive into a specific aspect of process mining deeper. We've held over 20 of these Academy sessions now, and all of the recordings are available on the community site. We also host something we call, or share something we call a use case series. For many of us, process mining is a new muscle, and learning how to use that workbench to dig into different areas and find improvement opportunities is something we're doing for the first time. So what we've started to do is post short little 5-minute videos on how to do the most common types of analysis, like that multi-hop scenario that we just built the project for here today, or looking at things that are taking longer to route than resolve, or how to do SLA breach analysis. So there's about 9 or 10 5-minute recordings for common use cases out there. We'll be using some of these use cases in the 4th part of this series, where we'll look at them live and how to configure them. And then lastly, hey, if you missed the first session, or there's others in your organization that you want to see process mining, we have a recorded overview and demo out there on the community site. If you search up the why and what of in-platform process mining, it'll take you to a community article in which you can find those 2 recordings. So lots of opportunities to learn more above and beyond this session here today. Now, I'll jump into the Q&A and see if there's any questions. If you've got questions and you've not already posted them in Q&A, please post them now, and I'll get to my best to answer them. So first question, is there a way to open those tickets from findings in the list view? Yes. So if you want that, one of the beautiful parts to being an in-platform solution is that you always have the ability to get down to the detailed records if you have the rights to do so. ACLs apply. It's an advantage, again, to using an in-platform solution, as we respect all your ACLs. But as you kind of drill into the finding definitions, once you get to the process map itself, so let's say you saw a finding definition of, hey, there was 1,800 tickets that went into the state of awaiting caller info. You can drill into the process map for just those 1,800, and then on any node on the map, you can click on it, and you'll see a run view records option, and it will get you those records. And that's something that we'll be covering in the next session as well. It's just one of those things that you use to analyze the data. Where can we get the templates? Are they available with process mining, or do you need to install them separately? So those templates that come in part of those configuration records, those are going to come with the content packs. So on the store itself, if you go out, and I'll just step back in the slide here. Oops. Right. So you're going to want to make sure that you have, let's say, from the store, the ITSM process mining content pack installed. Or if you're trying to use this for field service management, you're going to want to make sure you have the process mining content pack for field service management set up or installed. The best way to check whether you have these content packs installed is to go look for the configuration records for each of the tables that you're thinking of mining. Those are the things that, when you install these content packs, essentially what it's doing is adding the configuration record for the tables that are aligned to those solutions. So that's the first step to see if you have the content packs installed, is to check those configuration records that we've talked about. Any other questions out there? last chance for romance.